I want to talk a little bit about the word liberation. Liberation has a really positive connotation with it. It's a good thing. Capital G, capital T, good thing. Why is that? Who needs liberation? Well, oppressed people. What happens when you liberate oppressed people? They have freedom. That's another one of those words that's a good thing. Justice is another word like that. But it's not always a good thing. I'll let Gadsat explain.
So, cultural relativism frees us from the onerous task of having to judge the other, right? Because we're also empathetic and caring. So, who are we to judge a culture that might cut off the clitorises of 5-year-old girls? You must be engaging in cultural annihilation of the other. So, in this case, the ism is liberating me from the shackles of having to judge someone else. Social constructivism also liberates me from this pesky thing called reality, because what it does, it basically says we are all born with equal potentiality, and the only thing that could have acted on otherwise empty brains and equal potential is some sequence of socialization forces. So, had it not been that my mother hugged me too much or too little, I could have been the next Michael Jordan. So, in that sense, it liberates me from the shackles of my unique, barriers to succeed. And then finally, one that probably you didn't think about when you were coming up with this question, Pat, the isms, is Islamism. Islamism frees me from having to frontally criticize Islam. So I create this mythical unicorn called Islamism so I can critique Islamism. That's bad. Islam is gorgeous. Islamism is bad. But of course, for someone who understands these things, Islamism is almost entirely what Islam is. Most of Islam is political, very little of Islam is spiritual. So Islamism is not something outside of Islam, it is what defines Islam. So each of these isms have one thing in common: they liberate us from something that is otherwise too pesky to attack frontally.
Notice how he was using the term liberation? For cultural relativism, it liberates the individual from the responsibility of being able to form a judgment about another culture. No need to think about it. You can revel in your ignorance in a who am I to judge another culture way. No sweat off your brow. No need to engage your rational thinking processes. For Islamism, it liberates you from having to think too hard on what Islam is. I can't begin to tell you the number of people I've talked to about the subject who had no idea there was a political aspect to it at all. Most people had already gone the route of cultural relativism and decided there was no need to engage with it at all, and therefore knew nothing about it, and were working off completely false assumptions. Now, for social constructivism, it liberates the individual from reality. I don't know about you, but I'm not keen on being liberated from reality. This goes to the whole blank slate theory, everyone is completely equal before they're socialized by society and all of that. Unfortunately, that's not true, but I'll let someone else explain that.
Then a propaganda of illegitimate aspirations of working class, betterment of life, equality. Equality, mind you. President Kennedy once said, we will make America to believe that people are born equal. Are people born equal? Is there any mentioning in the Bible or any other holy scripture in any religion, if you don't believe me, go to the library and check it. There is not a single word about equality, just the opposite. By your deeds, God will judge you. What you do is important, the merit of your personality. You cannot legislate equality. If you want to be equal, you have to be equal. You have to deserve it. And yet we build our society on the principle of equality. We say people are equal. We know it is false. It's a lie. Some people are tall and stupid. Others are short, bold, and clever.
So, liberation isn't always necessarily a good thing. Capital G and capital T. Now, we've got a framework to work within, at least when dealing with the isms. So let's use it to look at one: wokeism. We're going to use a shorter but more densely packed definition, so I'm not going to sit here and read at you for too long, and I'll be using the New Discourses Commentary definition of woke, written by James Lindsay, and I'll put the link for this and everything else down below in the description. In brief, woke means having awakened to having a particular type of critical consciousness, as these are understood within critical social justice. To first approximation, being woke means viewing society through various critical lenses as defined by various critical theories bent in service of an ideology most people currently call social justice. That is, being woke means having taken on the worldview of critical social justice, which sees the world only in terms of unjust power dynamics and the need to dismantle problematic systems. That is, it means having adopted theory and the worldview it conceptualizes. All right, we're not going to unpack all of that, and I'm just going to apologize right now for using the word critical about 20 times in a minute. But the gist that you want to take away from this is that wokeism is sort of an amalgamation of all the various critical theories. So critical race theory, critical theories of gender, etc., etc. Theory doesn't need to have critical in its name to be a critical theory, and it only really requires that a theory uses a critical lens. Critical in this case isn't the usage of the word like in critical thinking, like the ability to analyze information objectively and come up with a reasoned judgment. Generally, in this usage, critical means a sort of ruthless criticism. Leave no stone unturned and find every problem, every fault, no matter how small or even imaginary. Think of cutting off your nose to spite your face and then dial it up to 10 or higher. What do you need then to make a critical theory? James Lindsay already answered that, so we'll just listen to him for a minute.
Critical theory is the main product of the Frankfurt School, and critical theory is a way of doing theoretical thought that meets basically three criteria. First, it has to have a normative vision for society, that is, of liberation, and really what that means is being liberated from the liberal order and capitalism and into something like the Marxist or communist utopia on the other side of the rainbow. It has to be able to describe how society falls short of that normative vision. In other words, it has to be able to identify problematics, or as a kind of in a higher level description, it has to be able to point out the contradictions of the prevailing order and why they actually create oppression where they are alleged to create freedom and rationality. Instead, they create irrationality and oppression. And those problematics have to be pointed out where the liberal order, the Enlightenment rationalism, prevent the ability to have liberation. And third, as Marx would have it, you had to be able to wed a critical theory to praxis, which means to putting it into practice. So it had to be amenable to social activists and social activism. In other words,
So again, notice the use of liberation. The pattern we should be noticing here is that the word liberation coincides with altering cognitive processes in some way. Or in other words, it messes with how you think. With cultural relativism, it relieves the individual of the burden of engaging their rational faculties, thus making it difficult or impossible to judge another culture. With Islamism, you don't have to learn about Islam and engage your mental faculties beyond the type of all religions are beautiful, deep, and spiritual things. And with social constructivism, your thinking is no longer shackled by reality, and thus it is liberated. The question obviously then becomes, well, what does wokeism, quote unquote, liberate us from? The answer seems to be that it unshackles us from quite a lot of things at once. As James put it, being liberated from the liberal order and capitalism. Another way of saying this would be that it unmoors us from the foundation of Western Enlightenment values, which include the liberal order and capitalism, not to mention rights and civil rights, tolerance, science, math, and a lot more. Remember, a critical theory uses ruthless criticism that's not required to be based in reality. If a pink bicycle costs more than a blue one, a ruthless criticism of that would be something like, the corrupt capitalist system is also sexist, and those in charge of making the bicycles are sexists who either knowingly or subconsciously hate women and wish to take more of their money due to their false consciousness. It's very nasty stuff when you take the criticisms to an extreme, well past anything rational or sane. It's not unfair to say that such ruthless criticism, though not critical theory specifically, had a hand to play in most of the major tragedies that plagued the 20th century in Europe as well as China. Suffice it to say that those who are extreme and radical in their criticism to the levels that we're talking about are rabidly intolerant people. If your worldview is, let's say, that every rich person hates you and is personally involved in taking advantage of or abusing you or someone like you, knowingly or unknowingly, you're probably going to be a pretty resentful and hateful person. And that is what leads us to our good friend, the philosopher Karl Popper, and his paradox of tolerance. So I'll skip some of the reading on this, but keep in mind that this was written at the tail end of World War II, with the Nazis still around. Popper pointed out that paradoxically, a tolerant society would be tolerant of intolerance, and that could lead to the end of a tolerant society. Pretty simple, tolerate the Nazis and your country turns into the Third Reich. Therefore, do not be tolerant of the intolerant. Now, we're going to focus on the highlighted part here that's usually ignored when referencing Popper, how to identify a group of individuals who are intolerant. Intolerance doesn't only come in just one flavor, so this is his attempt at describing the qualities of individuals so intolerant that he claims society should retain the right to suppress them. In this formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies. As long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion, suppression would certainly be most unwise. But we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument, but begin by denouncing all argument. They may forbid their followers to listen to rational argument because it is deceptive, and teach them to answer arguments by the use of their fists or pistols. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law, and we should consider incitement to intolerance and persecution as criminal, in the same way as we should consider incitement to murder or to kidnapping or to the revival of the slave trade as criminal. So basically what he's doing here is describing three things we need to look out for in regards to people who are so intolerant that society should claim the right to suppress them. Let's go over them and see if the woke fit these descriptions. The first one is they denounce all argument, meaning they do not like to debate or enter adversarial conversation that requires rational argumentation. So this is a bit of a tricky one. Arguing with a woke person does happen, but it's difficult to call it an argument. They simply disagree with all rational arguments, and it's super frustrating. They say things that only make sense if you construct reality in a way that's opposite to how things actually work, and this results in a communication breakdown. Here's an example from Brett Weinstein's Maoist struggle session with some pretty woke people on Clubhouse.
So Brett, you agree you're transphobic?
No, I don't agree that I'm
You're a
transphobic.
scientist and you used anecdotal experience to justify your view on pronouns. You're a scientist. Like, just because someone has only ever eaten hot dogs doesn't mean that hamburgers don't exist. And if hamburgers can see your statements, then why are you making them?
Now, in case you missed it, what he said was, just because someone has only ever eaten hot dogs doesn't mean that hamburgers don't exist. And if hamburgers can see your statements, then why are you making them? I can't even say that's not much of an argument. It's not one at all, unless you have, as the critical theorists would call it, a critical consciousness. And trust me, you don't want one of those. To be fair, that person was definitely woke, but clearly they aren't sending their best. More importantly, I'd say give the newdiscourses.com essay, "No, the woke won't debate you," Here's why. A read. I'll try and summarize some of the key takeaways for you as quickly as I can. First, they believe the system is rigged against them. Not just capitalism or the liberal order, but literally everything. The way knowledge has been produced is counter to what they perceive to be reality and is always oppressive. Bridges, oppressive and against them. American society, oppressive and against them. The legal system, oppressive and against them. Civil rights, oppressive and against them. Starting to see the pattern? How do they prove all those things are oppressive? Endless, ruthless criticism. Who built that bridge? Who uses it? How much? When? What's their racial demographic? How much money do they have? Are they able-bodied? You get the idea. There are very good reasons we have laws and customs, and one of their main functions is to suppress intolerant people that match up with Popper's formulation. They also believe there's no way you can disagree with them legitimately. Disagreement among woke people to see who can outwoke the other, that's fine. Anyone else? They're oppressors who are either knowingly trying to do some type of violence to them or trying to do violence to them through false consciousness. Oh, and violence doesn't mean physical violence only, or even emotional abuse. If you use math, well, math is oppressive and racist, and oppression and racism are violence, so you're harming them. Just a reminder here, the truly woke types are not rational or sane people. If this sounds crazy, that's because they are, to a very real extent, liberated from rational thought. And they're also pretty big on guilt by association. Simply put, if everyone's an oppressor who's racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever, why would you want to even be near them? For them, that's the majority of the population. Even talking to an oppressor makes them guilty of supporting oppression. They'll ditch friends, family, loved ones, you name it. I'd also point out that the bigger names in wokeness like Ibram Kendi or Robin DiAngelo do not debate. They do not argue with anyone. They write books, they'll give interviews to people, but only if they are not questioned. Praise is allowed, and questions about how to be more woke are allowed. I'd say they meet the qualification that Popper laid out about denouncing argument. You might get words out of them, but their logic is designed purposefully to not make any sense, and that's only when they do speak. Give the whole essay a read, it'll be linked in the description below. Next up, we have forbids followers to listen to rational argument because it's deceptive. So, I believe we just covered a lot of that a minute ago. Purity testing via guilt by association, teaching that engaging with non-woke people is a form of violence being done by non-woke people who are definitionally oppressors, at least by wokeism standards. But they also take it a step further than that and actively attempt to shut down conversations other people are having. Someone's giving a lecture at university? Try to interrupt and disrupt it. For them, it's shutting down the speech of oppressors, people with violent words and violence in their hearts, even if they don't know it. Here's just a few examples.
That's violent. Do you oppose everybody that's violent? Because I speak out against violence all the time. Why are you trying to shut them up? Do you speak out against everyone who's violent? Why are you trying to shut them up? All I'm saying is that my only sunshine. Yes, smart. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll
I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I say the woke meet Popper's second qualification for intolerant people. Funny that, how they want tolerance for themselves, but they don't tolerate anything from anyone else. This is straight from one of the fathers of critical theory, Herbert Marcuse, and his essay Repressive Tolerance. Absolute tolerance for me, absolutely none for thee. Popper's third qualification is teaching them to answer argument with violence. Given that they consider arguments from non-woke people to be violence against them, and thus physical violence, or really any kind of violence on their part, is self-defense, they seem to qualify for this as well.
In Minnesota, with all these killings, y'all not saying the right shit. Y'all telling motherfuckers to come with their hands up and peacefully assemble. For what? Nah, fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck you. Fuck them. Fuck anybody who's peaceful right now. Because when Martin Luther King was here, we had 1 million motherfuckers marching saying, let's be peaceful. But now y'all still begging for y'all freedom. So I say, they still shooting y'all down. They must want a war. So go get y'all gasoline at y'all gas station. Stop going to the protests. Go to the gas station. Get y'all gasoline. Go get some dish soap. If you scared, you don't got no gun, you don't need no gun. Go get some dish soap. Go get some glue. Go get some honey, some shit, some bleach, some shit that you can fucking throw at these fucks. While the men do what the fuck we gotta do. Cause I'ma make these phone calls. And we gonna pull up doing what the fuck we gotta do. Ain't nobody finna be keep begging for no justice. Motherfucker about to take their justice. Nobody finna be begging for no country. We about to take our shit back. Funny as fuck, hey.
So, that lovely gentleman certainly fits Popper's third criteria, and he's certainly very woke. Now, let's see how they treat a journalist who's argued against them, denounced them on stage, displayed their beliefs, tactics, and ideology, and exposed them repeatedly in any number of ways.
No
You're
idea what's
infiltrator ass,
happening.
lying
Hey, you need to
racist.
get off my property right now.
Holocaust
You're
denying bitch.
trespassing.
I can't wait for you to come out, Andy.
Out.
You thought the milkshakes were bad last time. We're gonna beat the fuck out of you, bitch. Y'all, Andy knows here at the Nines Hotel. Andy knows inside the hotel calling the cops on everyone, saying that he's gonna get killed out here. At the Nines Hotel right here by Pioneer Square. He's hiding right here on the phone with the cops. And they're trying to kick him out.
No.
Medic! Medic! His veins in the back of his fold. Put him on his side.
I think it's pretty safe to say that the woke fit all three of Popper's qualifications for a group of individuals so intolerant that society should claim the right to suppress them. Historically speaking, other groups that also meet this criteria include the Nazis under Hitler, communists under Stalin, as well as communists under Mao, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge, and more. The larger difference between the woke and those others is that they are far weaker in terms of having anything resembling a physical armed force. They have no specific leader and are decentralized and made up of multiple types of intolerant peoples, depending on which ruthless criticism based in unreality they adhere to. Sometimes they work together, and at other times they hate each other. Violence is much less tolerated in Western society today than it was in the past, and for the most part, the woke are subverters. They will use linguistic trickery, emotional manipulation, they lie and smear as easily as most people breathe, and they will take advantage of corrupt politicians and even work with them as long as it forwards whatever insane goal they currently have by even one step. Now, if you've ever heard the confessional poem, First They Came For, you should have a better idea what it's referring to. Sure, it refers to the Nazis, but more specifically, it maps directly onto Popper's definition of people so intolerant that society should claim the right to suppress them in the name of tolerance. As with the woke, all such intolerant groups come from outside the liberal order, which makes them very difficult to detect or understand for the average person. Liberation is a word that generally has a positive connotation and is associated with them. They ask for freedom and justice as well, while completely changing the entire logical structure behind those words. In more simple terms, they create an entire pseudo-reality that they live within that is oppressed by actual reality and attempt to take control of any lever of power in society that they can get their hands on. They come from outside the understanding of a liberal society that tries to map reality onto people who believe in unreality. You could just as easily say they're denizens of unreality, and we have laws, culture, and custom purposefully built to suppress them by design due to the sheer level of mental derangement and intolerance that comes with them. Now, to be fair, there are people who support them who understand none of this, or simply disagree with this characterization of the woke, and they believe sincerely from within the liberal order that they are being kind, caring, empathetic allies. They're generally referred to as useful idiots, and beyond that, there are others who simply don't understand or are too politically polarized and so on. At some point, they do cross a line, and the truly woke types are far, far past that demarcation point. While the Nazis dwelled in one type of pseudo-reality, the woke occupy another pseudo-reality. This is obviously all very disturbing, but to hammer home how dangerous the situation is, let's not forget that the current sitting Vice President of the United States of America, before the election, called for people to donate to a fund bailing out protesters, where quote-unquote protesters range from the lowest level of confused, useful idiot, all the way up to suspected murderers and rapists that were rioting and breaking the law. Not to mention that the sitting president of the United States just got on national TV and lied to the world and gave a huge amount of cover to the woke while making America look racist, weak, and ineffectual.
The joint session of Congress, according to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
Now, I don't want to leave this on a completely negative note. The woke are essentially subverters, which makes them a sort of house of cards. History has given us a blueprint already for how to deal with extreme subversion in the form of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. Like I mentioned before, the woke, and those who support them, lie and smear as easily as they breathe, so keep in mind Solzhenitsyn's quote. "We know they are lying. They know they are lying. They know, we know they are lying. We know, they know, we know they are lying. But they are still lying." I think that one sort of stands on its own, but equally, another important quote from Solzhenitsyn to keep in mind is this one. "You can resolve to live your life with integrity. Let your credo be this. Let the lie come into the world, let it even triumph, but not through me." This one's a call to not take part in the lies yourself. The prime example of this is that Trump is Hitler reborn or just as bad as Hitler. If others say it and you can't change their mind, so be it. But do not participate in the lie. This will be how you retain integrity. That's just the biggest accepted lie, but there are thousands upon thousands of others. Communism is good, to we live in a cis-heteropatriarchal society, or whatever other lies that sound good, but contain, at best, only a nugget of truth surrounded by a mountain of turds. I'd also suggest giving a look at James Lindsay's A Manifesto for the Based, which sort of explains and updates much of Solzhenitsyn's efforts to be more easily digestible by the layperson. Broadly speaking, being based, with a capital B, is the polar opposite of being woke. While the woke have a pseudo-reality, being based is quite literally being strongly based in reality. To quote the first paragraph, "When Alexander Solzhenitsyn, author of the Gulag Archipelago, gave in his noble lecture, The Credo, "Let the lie come into the world, let it even triumph, but not through me," that was based. Not participating in transparent lies or mass delusion is based. Doing so against the madness of the following crowd is based. Nearly everything that it means to be based is either contained within or predicated upon this one trait of character. So give him a follow on social media. He's at Conceptual James on Twitter. Make use of and share content from newdiscourses.com and his podcast and all of that. Much of how the woke came to be as strong as they are in recent years is derived from their ability to signal boost, meaning share their message wide and far, nonstop, all the time. Like, shares, retweets in every area of social media over a long enough time during a period of political polarization has a substantial effect. It's no surprise that the word based is being used more and more frequently, and the more people that know it and understand it, the better off we are. For those who are looking to read and learn more about this stuff, here are the books you want to take a look into. The more difficult reads that delve directly into modern history and the horrors of the intolerant in the 20th century, at least the ones to start with and base yourself off of, are The Gulag Archipelago, obviously, by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shirer. The more recent books that explain various parts of what's going on that I'd recommend to start with are Cynical Theories, How Activist Scholarship Made Everything About Race, Gender, and Identity, and Why This Harms Everybody by James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. The Parasitic Mind by Gad Saad. Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy by Andy Ngo. The Antifa, Stories from Inside the Black Bloc by Jack Posobiec. Those four will give you a good overview of how we've gotten to the point where we are and give you a greater understanding of the current situation and how to resist and push back against wokeism. Now, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and feel free to do the whole like, subscribe, and share thing. Whoever your favorite content creator is, or the content that speaks to you and you agree with, share that stuff and don't be shy about it. Thank you.